Cause and effect, cause and effect. We've heard that formula enough times to think that this is the way our world works. This is the stuff we learn when we are kids.
A cause happens first. A cause is why something happens. For example, it's raining is a cause. Effect happens after the cause.
In theory, it sounds nice, logical, coherent. But what if that idea is reversed in practice? What if our experience shows that we've got this whole cause and effect thing totally backwards? In the real world, in science, philosophy, literature, language, and daily experiences, the effects are actually coming before the causes. This idea is absurd, and this video is precisely about that absurdity.
Cause and effect, my love.
Cause? There is no cause for this. What cause?
Before you click away, let me remind you that all interesting stories, all detective stories, are stories where the effect comes before the cause. In every classic detective story, the murder is committed at the beginning, and only later is the detective assigned to find out the cause, or as is colloquially called, the whodunit. And it's not just detective novels that work that way. This very medium, YouTube, works this way as well. For you to click on this video, I had to make my title and thumbnail as effective and close to the main message of the content as possible. In other words, you already have to know what you'll be watching before you begin to watch. Any YouTube guru will tell you that you first have to think of the title and thumbnail before even starting on the content itself. That's the same reversal. The murder, the nugget of the story, has to be already known. The effect comes before the cause. In the same way, you wouldn't go watch a movie without seeing a trailer. You wouldn't read a book without knowing it's already famous. And you wouldn't buy a product without some effective marketing campaign that makes you buy that product. And that's the key word with all the effects. They are effective, which means they come before the causes are known. Effective thumbnails and titles, effective marketing, effective communication, and effective opening of the detective storyline. Everything we call effective comes first, and only later do we figure out the reasons why. Let's say you want to build a house. First you need a project of the house, the idea of it, the finished picture, the architectural plan. In other words, you need the effect of the final idea before you start causing it into being. The effect is the idea, the final product or project, and the cause is what comes later, the thing itself. That's why in the Romance languages the word for thing sounds so close to cause. In Spanish, cosa, Italian, cosa, French, chose. I actually made another video just on that little twist of language, so make sure to check that one out. We are creatures driven first by ideas, which only later become the things we build. We need the final project in mind before we can even begin to act. Or a simpler example, when you're going somewhere, you have to know where you're going before you get there. The idea of where you're going is the effect. Let's call it an effective idea. And only then you start going there because you had the idea. If you meet a person who doesn't know where they're going, you'd find them a bit crazy, wouldn't you? A person who acts purely on a cause without any effect behind it is absurd. But that's exactly the old idea of cause and effect that we still consider to be the logical one and which we learn as kids. Any scientific or medical discovery works from effects to causes and not the other way around. They're all detective stories. First the symptoms are known, the effects, and the disease is discovered later. Any major invention often happens by accident where effects fall down on the inventor, and in the case of Newton and the apple, as the legend goes, this is literal. Newton didn't cause the apple to fall on his head. He only observed its effect by working up the cause backwards to discover gravity. Inventions and discoveries work by experimentation. You repeat the effect as many times as possible to find the pattern of the cause. That's why it's called experimentation. Ex means that which has been done, what has expired in time, experienced. And ironically, if something can be explained, it means that the effect always preceded that which needs explaining, the cause. The irony is that if causes preceded effects, they wouldn't need explaining, wouldn't they? And this brings us to the key word ex facere in Latin, which gives us the word effect, what has been brought out, made out. And one major effect that we don't notice, in fact, the most important effect, is what we call existence, or to use another word, being. Human existence is at the center of all absurdity, because to exist means to somehow be ahead of oneself. To exist means to experiment with one's own being through one's actions, that which we call experience. All of our actions in life are experiments. Nobody knows what they will become. Everything is trial and error. Everything is experimentation. To exist as a human being is to have this reversed order of effects and ideas. Our life projects before we enact the causes. What drives us are effective ideas which later become our actions. That's why we seek these effective ideas in reading books, listening to podcasts, and gathering information before we start acting. We're striving to gather as much mental effect as possible that would push us into action, into the right action. It's as if we first want to get into the future with our minds, and only then our bodies move into the past by experiences where our minds have already been. As the existentialist philosopher Søren Kierkegaard put it, we seek not the present but the past, not joy, for that is always present, but sorrow, because its nature is to pass by. Existence essentially means always going back, from effects to causes. The first hero of Western literature, Odysseus, shows this perfectly. He goes forward only by going home, backwards to Ithaca. Progress for him is a return. His journey is one long return. He's always ahead of himself and yet heading back. That's the absurdity of time. Moving forward is, in a strange way, always a return, just like the curious case of Benjamin Button, the story of a man who lives his life in reverse, aging backwards from old to young instead of the other way around.
And I was born under unusual circumstances. While everybody else was aging, I was getting younger, all alone.
And that backwards feeling isn't just a myth or a movie plot. It's very close to how we experience our own timeline. Robbie Williams has a great line for this in his song Feel.
Before I've arrived, I can see myself coming.
And that's how we work, in an absurd way. We can see ourselves coming before we arrive. All of our effects precede our causes, whereas philosophers like to say, theory is the highest form of practice. One philosopher who is considered the godfather of existentialism, that school which studies human existence, is Martin Heidegger, who wrote his existentialist magnum opus, Being and Time, published in 1927. Heidegger was a serious philosopher, but at the center of his idea of human existence and of being is something very absurd: time. I wouldn't go into details on this very complex book for lack of time, pun intended. But we'll just look at the words we use in everyday life to show the absurdity of time in our experiences of everyday existence. Let's look at the central issue and central problem with being, which is time. Because time is an issue. No one denies that. Time is a problem. But the question is, in what sense is it an issue? What makes time such an important issue? And here the word itself starts to give us a clue. Issue already tells on itself. It means something that issues, something that comes out. From the Latin exitus, an exit, a coming out. Once again, we encounter that little X, what's already out, already done, already effective. What comes out of time, wherever it comes out, is what we call an outcome, an effect. And time is an effective outcome, the most effective one of all, because its effect is always present, what we call now. No matter how much time passes, time remains a constant now. In other words, we only have the outcome of time at every now, but we don't know where it comes out of. We don't know what causes now into being. All the nows come first, and only then we have a then, what we call back then. So now comes before then, and not the other way around, which is strange. This means that then could not have caused now, as the effect of now always precedes all the causes we call then, which is the past. It's as if the present was always ahead of the past, which is absurd. Our experiences of time shows that it actually goes in reverse, just like the curious case of Benjamin Button. Whether it's now or 5 minutes ago, it was now back then, and it's now now. And it will be now 5 years from now. We can't escape the now. It always comes first. It is very effective and very absurd. The effect of being, of existence, and of time is that we only have the outcomes, only effects of time, but the causes are never known. Neither now nor 5 minutes ago. The standard linear cause and effect model says that 5 minutes ago was the cause of now. But in practice, it can't be the cause of now because 5 minutes ago was its own now. And we can be pretty sure that 5 years from now, we'll still have now. No matter how much we go into the future, we always get stuck in the present. Or as Marshall McLuhan put it,
the future of the future is the present. And this is something that people are terrified of.
It is terrifying and absurd to think that all time is just now. It doesn't matter if it was 5 minutes ago or 5 years from now. It all remains the same effect without a cause. We get stuck in the effect, and only then we do search for the causes, the back then. That's a problem. That's an issue. In quantum physics, the issue of time is often pictured as a black hole, which is a kind of literal depiction of an issue. Something comes out of something, but we don't know of what. It's an exit, an outcome that comes out of another dimension, one we have not the slightest idea about. Hence we call it a black hole. Ironically, outcomes are called outcomes for this very reason. They've already come out, and only later do we search for the origin, for the cause. With time, we're always late, because by the time we search for the cause of this outcome of now, we end up in the new now. The movie Inception shows this absurd search for cause as well. Everything there is a dream within a dream until the very end of the movie, where we're still not sure whether we found the original cause of all the others, the inception of time. Everything is wrapped up in absurd, circular, and problematic loops. What we generally call a problem is knowing the effects, but without its causes. And time is, by definition, the main problem of all. If there were only one problem in the world, it would be time. Because just like the word issue, which tells us that it issues itself, the word problem tells us what the problem is. Pro-balein in Greek means thrown forward. And that's our story. We are thrown forward, always ahead of ourselves, throughout our existence. We are the ones who act upon the effects that come before the causes. We are the ones who see ourselves coming before we arrive. We have projects, products, prospects, problems, and even personal pronouns. All these pros make us the protagonists of our own existential stories, our very own detective stories, as it were. As we go through life, we are writing our own detective story by looking back at how far we've gone from where we've come from. To be, as a human being, always means to be projected into the future, to deal with outcomes and effects first, and only then search for causes and explanations later. That's the problem of human existence, the absurd problem for any protagonist of any story. Ours is the world of the theater of the absurd and of quantum mechanics, where the neat, linear path from past to future simply doesn't exist. It's also the world we like to call postmodern, and even that word already gives away the joke. postmodern, always after, always a little bit too late. We're forever post-time, chasing the past from inside the future, or rather, the present. It's no longer a world ruled by clean causation, but one built on constant experimentation. Ours is also the world of Sisyphus, as told by the existentialist Albert Camus. You remember his fate. Every time the absurd hero pushes the boulder up the hill, it rolls back down to the starting point, and he has to begin again. That's one way to picture the absurdity of time. Each now is like that boulder at the top, an effect we've just reached, and the moment we try to pin down its cause, it slips away and we find ourselves in yet another now. Camus writes, "If time frightens us, this is because it works out the problem and the solution comes afterwards." First come the problems of existence and of time with its strange effects, and only then do we figure out the solutions and the causes. We live in our own detective story, trying to go from outcomes to their causes, from the end to the beginning and back again, over and over. So welcome to the postmodern world, to the world of the absurd. Of course, it's not that we recently changed the course of time and made it absurd. Time has always been like that since the time of Odysseus, but only now we have accepted this absurdity, it seems. We've accepted it in our philosophy, in our physics, in our literature. The main absurd detective story of our time is Kafka's The Trial, where the protagonist wakes up being arrested on a random morning, and all he does is trying to search for the cause of this arrest, without any success. But the trial is the essence of the absurd message. Keep trying, keep experimenting, but don't think that you will find the cause necessarily. And even though this detective story is absurd, it still remains an exciting one, an exciting experiment with existence. And that seems to be the way we do things in the postmodern age. We've already arrived before we understand why we're here. And the rest of the story is us trying to catch up, always post, always a little too late. And that's exactly what makes our existence so exciting.